방금 봐봐 누르지 주인대가 이마 이래서 주인대 밖에 가수 가서래 미다 동화 안 동화지 차와 준비나 안 남정체 아니 초도 차와 준비 셈정체 초도 셈니 정체비 춘예라신 매바인 전이 전에다 송관나신 전이 가르송거래서나 미다 동화 아니 동화지 입지 아니 가서래 차와 준비 남정 저와서 남수지 저도 셈니 전에 아니 저와서 셈 정화 체차로 저도 셈니라 초내 셈니 전제비 셈니라 심 매바 이 스타디 베제트나 용어에 되라 어디가 가르송을 해서는 다 토마 아니 미다바당 동화당 다음에 봐 되게 저와 준비 수디 아니 셈 정화 치그래 근데 동거래 해서나 아니 도마 조충에 가서라 아니 단조 텐제냐 가다 아니 지대들이서 브랜드 매네비 아니 치와 제수 참바 좋아 지대들이 매네 치와 제수 참바 아니 치와 천년남아 눈겠다와요 치유 치보와자 미다나 웅우요 이제 로발라 사금터니 와사치 시와 나시 전이다 대라된 아니 단조 텐제냐 가당 지대들 정도 매네 치와 아니 신행 나선 그 동안용주 대다시야발라 때네 아니 세티 되게 그 로또네 와 세티 아니 되게 그 로또네 지된 치마 되게 그 로제 야你这我这看没大东巴当没些没大东巴东啊东啊些乔准备什么东西초도 셈니 존재 비춘이랑 심해 봐이是吧 담미다바당 동아와 동바당 동아와기 아니 차와숨보기 셈종하지 그래 차와숨보되기 와 초도 셈 존재의 가르래에서나 아니 최랑 심해 봐들이 라심보도 봐들이 와 다오나 차와 미다 동아 아니 가서 동아 미타 동바 동하기 아 차와서 먹기 셈 좋은단 거래래서나 담 미타 토마 아니 가서래 단주 텐지니가 안에 지된데 정도 미나를 치와 미다봐 어때는 친해 안에 나서 동아도 나선도 예대 동아 용초 삼네 대라 때는 안 대라 주민님 다 꾸졌습니다 여봐 이체와라 소위 요 중국 최대 삼발라 때네 안에 자 치와 안에 세대 되니까 로다야 세대 되니까 로 중하지
So then there's a verse from the praise to the Dharma Dhatu, which is composed by Arya Nagarjuna. And this verse says that by meditating on impermanence, suffering, and emptiness, one's able to purify one's mind, and then upon that basis, then develop the supreme kind of mind. And the way this verse is interpreted is that the first meditating on impermanence has to do with the practices that particularly pertain to the person of smaller scope, such that one starts off initially by recognizing the rarity and great value of this kind of human life that has opportunity and freedom from all kinds of the impossible obstacles to practice. So this sort of this life of opportunity and freedom is precious, and one has to recognize that, and then in addition to that, recognize the impermanence of it, the form of impermanence particularly that has to do with death. That is, death is the disintegration of this life, that if one recognizes then this opportunity that one has and the inevitability of death, that it will come and this life will be lost, then one has to develop some kind of concern for what is, turn away from excessive concern for the events of this life, not being so much worried about the experiences that one undergoes in the present life, but rather turn one's attention to what's going to happen to you in the future after you die, where you're going to go, and what kind of experience you're going to have to undergo in that sort of existence. So this impermanence, then, especially focusing on death, is the key practice there. Then recognition of impermanence and the inevitability of death. One has to develop confidence in the three jewels as having the ability to protect you from falling into a lower state of existence, and then that sort of confidence in them and the teachings of the teachings will give you the ability to engage in methods that will prevent you from falling into a lower state of existence after death.
Oh yeah, 미다 동바 동 아니 동아시 자와 준비 sem종제에 가라 대제라 아니 가서래 나당 풍보당 신당한 그 척한데지 이나양 아니 다지라 완전히 다그 동바 란자 왜 다그 동바 인단 다지라 완전히 동바 인장 아니 그지 병 안주 전인바 2年了点呢 아니 2年了点呢 대부 아니 4년 이 풍보 주대 미다지 2년 그 샤왕 전지 풍보대 주대 아니 풍보될 때네 아니 동아 다 주등이 내가서 샤바기 담보집이 동아 집이 동아 코로나 나이지 아니 가위 동아 아니 집이 동아 나이 동아 다 대라 샤바기 다 주등 가서 아니 가서래 동아 빠도면 많이야 되대 다 풍보디 미다지 다지 라완전지 동비 풍 미다지 량연전지 풍보디 용라 때네 레발라 때네 아니 동아다 빠도면 봐지 용거와디 중고 요인장 아니 대라 때네 아니 동아라 미세바가 내중지에 그와 동화 삼백권에 좀 예대라.现동화에 가슴만 가면 좋아나 세체리 동화 삼백강 삼대삼바 아니 동화라 미대병에 중계 아니 랑 동화도 진짜도 체네 중계 现동화도 체 동화 지나위 아니 동화 삼바라 때네 이제 제 텐데기 아니 가소래 아니 동안에 타박이 안에 타바튼이 로지 개발셔봐 인장 타바튼이 예발셔봐 인장 메다 동바 동아시 차와순비 섬정체 두싱어래.
So then the second phase is meditating on or purifying one's mind, or training one's mind by means of contemplating emptiness and suffering. Here in the middle section here, emptiness refers specifically, in particular, to the absence of a permanent unitary autonomous self. This within the aggregates that are appropriated, the appropriated aggregates, there's no such unitary autonomous permanent self. And yet holding to the self, holding to the aggregates as if they possess that kind of self, one engages in all kinds of activities that give rise to different kinds of experience. So the self is, or the person is empty of that kind of a permanent, autonomous, unitary self. Yet it appears as if it had that sort of self. And then by recognition of the absence of that kind of self, one can understanding that the person or self doesn't possess that kind of self, which is permanent, autonomous, and unitary, then one can see the aggregates as they actually are, such that one realizes that they're just appropriated or taken up by the force of mental afflictions and karma. And the mental afflictions and karma that create the aggregates are, by their very nature, contaminated. Therefore, the aggregates, the entire condition of the aggregates is contaminated. So once one has taken up the contaminated aggregates, one inevitably has to undergo the process of samsaric existence and experience, such that one has to, of course, be born, and the process of being born is suffering. There are multiple aspects of the suffering of birth. Likewise, then, immediately after birth, one begins to undergo aging, when it changes, and that process of aging is itself a form of suffering, and multiple aspects of suffering connected with aging. And then, of course, sickness is obviously suffering in multiple dimensions, and then death as well is suffering. As soon as one is appropriated, taken up the aggregates, then one inevitably must experience all of this massive suffering. And that applies not only to oneself, but likewise to all other sentient beings. So initially, at this point, though, in the intermediate phase of the path, one is primarily observing and concerned with one's own suffering nature and gaining familiarity with that. Then once one has done that properly, understood it, and evaluated it as it is, then one develops revulsion towards suffering, a kind of unbearable revulsion towards this basic suffering nature of samsara, which is the appropriated aggregates. And that sort of revulsion is itself a renunciation of suffering, a wish to become free from that suffering. So when one is in the intermediate phase of the path of a person of intermediate scope, then one is seeking liberation from that kind of suffering that one has recognized.
Oh yeah, 다 된다 공도 샤바기 안 도바라바 다티라 완제 동바당 아니 랑자투비 자이지 동바 bombarla tenne ani jigda leba cheba zamado ani ini kasore tawana bommini ba das kasore nyomombe tawa tatu ba bomwa de kanile bongore sana sim kasore simji nyomongge shawando soyegi ani rangsim kaso simji wando so sim nyomongge wando so nyomongge tawa 니몬 자원의 본제대 아니 가르레에서나 초도 셈니 종제 비춘이라시 매바인 세가나 자와 아니 라시도 주어진 봐 덴진 대본와 셰바라 코다 진당 무소 가와기 라시 매바 도비 로직이 니제기 라시 매바 도비 로직이 본고는 마도 태현바기 본민이 봐 인장 다 셈지 정말 라시 주어진 비트마 zemba pajadan jewa bonje de jonga chenga lo de karere esena ani chunye rashi meba yin sika rashi meba ngosum tobe lo de.
So then this intermediate phase of practice, as it's described here, one has developed an understanding that the person is empty of having a self, which is permanent, autonomous, and permanent, autonomous, and unitary, or slightly subtler than that, understanding that the person is empty of a self, which is a self-standing substance, self-sufficient substance, that level of understanding absence of self. But those two types of understanding of selflessness are only able to kind of relax a little bit the grasping at a real self, which is the foundation of samsara. So understanding those levels of selflessness are useful to diminishing the power or causing this grasping at or misapprehension of the self to loosen somewhat, but they're not able to eradicate that misapprehension of the self. The misapprehension of the self holds the self to be real, established as real, to exist by means of its own intrinsic nature. And that kind of misapprehension of self, in order to eliminate it completely, one must understand one must actualize its antidote. The antidote here being the understanding that there is no real self that is established by means of its own intrinsic nature, as it's misapprehended by the wrong view of the self. So that kind of a correct understanding of reality, of the nature of the self, is itself the contrary of and the antidote to the way that the misapprehension of the nature of the self, because the reality of absence of intrinsic existence is the opposite of the sort of existing by means of intrinsic existence, which is the object, the fictitious object apprehended by the misconception which holds the self to be real. So since those are the opposite of each other, when one develops the understanding and wisdom that sees the self as it is, as being empty or devoid of any kind of intrinsic existence, then one has developed the lagendi choktu di 측제 tamadi kare choktu
초도 셈니 존재 비춘이란 심매바이
choktu semni jongche choktu semni jongche choktu semni jongche rangshime So then it says that understanding absence of intrinsic existence is the agent which, the supreme agent for purifying the mind. And purifying the mind means eliminating the stains, which are the sort of imprints of misapprehending the self, holding the self to be real. The mind is contaminated by those imprints, those kinds of stains. So this understanding of absence of intrinsic existence is the supreme thing that purifies the mind of those stains.
Oh yeah, that tender ane rashime ba tombe lo jeba cheba la ngala ane rashime ba tang tomba tang la pap. Nala beche tela da kasan yage o kasore dur duri shaji kana ane jitura giri bala tena. Jeba che kana ane namdun dang namba ngala sawa ki ta jan la tang la pap ni. Ane rashime ba tang la pap ni rashime ba gacha rashime ba ka ni. Rashime me ba ka ni ane tendra we Rashid Gabi Shudulo, and a lad and David Nashatam Jetaba. Gacha Rashid to him, Mesam Menayang, and a Mingdam Dazamji, and a Chajetam Jetaba. What the Rashid Tomba Shene, and a Tanya do Minzan Tayo Tamji, and a Chajechaba Shesona, and it ended the Kasang to the Zamde. 장주심리에 가서 청나 동반 디시네 내단 대우 땜바캉 어 당신지 투배 동당 아니 요게와 채와라 되는 대우 대화당 요미게와 채와라 되는 대우 아니 동아 중화 대 태바대 와자와잔 띵와자 매중와잔 띵매중 세체 디송아체 디라텐디송라
So then this absence of intrinsic existence is in order to realize it, in order to realize it, one has to understand it. In order to understand it, one has to establish it. Thus, what we've covered up to this point is much of the subject matter here is devoted to establishing the absence of intrinsic existence. And then we did that, we've just gone over the method of establishing absence of intrinsic existence by means of the reason which investigates intrinsic existence in terms of something being identical or something being different, the identity or difference kind of reasoning which is employed to establish absence of intrinsic existence, showing that intrinsic existence is impossible. So then the other method is the sevenfold analysis, which goes through 7 different steps to establish absence of intrinsic existence. And then, we've gone down through the text here to the point where we arrived at the quotation from the commentary, the explanation of bodhicitta by Arya Nagarjuna. And there it says that having understood this emptiness of all phenomena, one who having understood this, nevertheless depends upon cause and effect. Here, this is saying that someone who understands that phenomena are empty, yet relies upon cause and effect. Cause and effect can refer to here things arising, karma and its results. One who has understood karma and its results as being clearly demonstrable within the context of understanding their absence of intrinsic existence, their being empty, then this is more marvelous than anything that's marvelous. It's more wonderful than anything that's wonderful. What this is saying here is that if one is able to understand the absence of intrinsic existence of things, and yet be able to establish cause and effect or karma and its results as mere names, as being merely designated, only existing in that status, and one is able to clearly demonstrate that, then this is a most wonderful sort of accomplishment.
Oh yeah, that 되게 전다데 렌드드빙 나라 셰드강아 손주 잠바 누구 뭐에 동바다 니레 디레 총와이 내가 니보 펜전도 개매반에 조체봐 니레 뭐사 주바다 니레 매도 총와 강 세네 어때 렌드드빙 나라 손아래 와 누구 뭐에 동바당 제가 치당 난기 5번 뒤그 아라신지 랑고 뭐에 주에 동바 당 랑게 뭐에 주에 동장 아니 누구 니레 때는 뒤중기 누구 니레 때는 뒤중기 대저 니레 매도 가서 누구 뭐에 동바 니레 좀 대충하시 내가 니보 니레 때는 유개와 채와라 때는 저 대화당 미개와 채와라 두미 저 동안 영애와 니보 세가 라시메 발라 내가 니베 아니 유개와 채와라 때는 저 동안 대화 중하다 미개와 채와라 때는 주미 저 동안 중하라 내가 배 가서를 체제 줘봐 너무 로이送와라 때는 땡줄라 내가 체제送와 때는 다바 로이도送와라 때는 아니 라신메 발라 내가 체제 送와 누구는 또 받단 딜레 디레 총만이 내가 니보 펜전도 개매 빠니 라신이 또 받자도 가라 때는 다와 이제 좀 믿어 버티려 많이 봐 때는 대비 군대 소리 잠바 라신이出完 좀 믿어 버티려 많이 봐다 좀더 엄마마다 我提议我你我判定都可以买吧，记住说去光都票啊钱不超钱吧，对嘞，我那就我找我就话当对嘞，买的熊啊就话买的，真的，但全是什么这个这个几百一百的。
So then the same thing is said in the Praise to Dependent Origination by J. Tsongkhapa. Here and there it says that when one has understood that all these things, that's inner or outer phenomena, whatever exists, is empty, is devoid of any kind of intrinsic nature, but having understood that, one is able to know, has certainty or has ascertained that cause and effect are validly established. That is that, and especially in terms of karma and its results, that if one performs virtuous action, one will experience happiness. If one performs non-virtuous action, one will experience suffering. So someone who's able to establish those two things, the absence of intrinsic existence and the nevertheless the valid the ability to ascertain with certainty the relationship between cause and effect, especially as it applies to our actions and the experiences that result from those actions. If you're able to do that such that the two do not conflict with each other, rather they cooperate with each other to the degree that the more you understand one, the more you gain certainty about the other, then J. Rinpoche says there's nothing more marvelous than this. This is, and just as Arya Nagarjuna says in this verse, there's nothing more wonderful than this. So here, it's what is being said is that within the context of causality, and especially karma and its results, one has to be able to see that the causes and the effects and the relationships between them are merely designatedly existent. They only exist in a dependent way, dependent upon designation. So that being so, they're mere names, and they yet only having that status of mere name and existing in a dependently designated fashion. That if one understands that correctly, then recognition of their merely being dependently designated reinforces your understanding that they're empty of intrinsic existence, and then on the contrary, understanding that they're empty of intrinsic existence reinforces and supports your understanding that they're merely dependently designated and only exist as mere names.
Oh yeah. Ranshiji, Kasore, Ranjuba Manche, Mobama Walla, Kanje, Ranshi Yobata, Yemeki Chapacham, you're not Ranshi Yoga, Yoga in Zang. That Tanju Lula, Ranshi Yobatanda, Yobakitam Chapachan. Chidana Gongo, Rangi Tanji, Meba Rede, Meba Yimokoba. I am Ranshi Rangi Tanji, Mena Meba.
So then this way of establishing emptiness and dependent designation as cooperating such that one reinforces the other, this is a unique position of the Prasangika school. The other schools, the Swatantrikas and other realists, they're not able to do that. They say that if things are merely designated, then they're not able to function in causal relationships, and so they're not able to establish emptiness within that context. So here, then this leads into the next point, that one has to be able to one must be able to distinguish something existing, whether or not something existing or not existing by means of intrinsic nature versus general existence and non-existence. These two pairs, or you could say you could break them down into four, and then there's an instruction following in the basic text we're reading is the instruction on how to do that. So here, this begins with, in order to get that kind of understanding that was presented in the explanation of bodhicitta in the verse just above, one has to be able to, one must be able to distinguish existing by intrinsic nature and mere existence. One has to be able to recognize the difference between those two, and then likewise one has to be able to differentiate existing, not existing by intrinsic identity versus mere non-existence or non-existence per se. So the other schools of Buddhist philosophy, all other philosophers are not able to do this. They're not able to, if they would say, if something does not exist by means of its intrinsic identity, then it is non-existent. It's not an actual thing. And so they're not able to make that kind of distinction.
Oh, yeah. 아니 다왜 시작이 되는 나가라 코자는 대단 넘버 제바나 라시 초로 제바 니지 7 오원은 코자는 오원나 라신지 주바 고기 아니 메라소비 메라소비 오원은 가서래 넘버 멤버네 미고고 전에 송환하시 메라소바 넘버 내지 넘버 멤버네 미고고 전에 송환이장 시작이 뒤에 가서 다가 송환해 코자니 니 넘버 제바나 라신 초와 술제바 니지 세가나 아니 다든 자외 채나 많이 엔바나 아니 라신지 주고 고기와래 고자 라신지 주고 고기 밀어서 오남 이 안에 레다 넘버 멤버나 고고 말해
So then this is this differentiation of mere existence from existing by intrinsic nature, or non-existence and not existing by means of intrinsic identity. This is stated in the commentaries composed by the Master Chandrakirti. And he says that we negate intrinsic existence, but we do not negate, and we make a lot of effort to negate intrinsic existence, but we do not negate the but we do not negate the ability of things like one's visual organ, etc., to produce results. So this is here saying that functional things like the eye, the eyeball, or the eye organ, and all other functional things, they're able to produce effects. They're able to produce outcomes by their operations. So in negating, this is saying that in negating intrinsic existence, that means when you search the object, when you search the basis of designation of the object and you don't find the designated object within the basis of designation, one has negated the intrinsic existence of that object, but one has not negated the existence of the object and its ability to engage in functional relationships and to produce effects.
Oh yeah. That is Jubarande Kainjiri. Jujele Sunya Rashi may be good and David number Shaba Sheshindo. Sunya Rashi Menayang. Ani Ju Sunya Le, Ani Debu Sunya Zimbi Mishekeba. Chitajini Sunya Sodon La Shevati, number Jeju Tar Swana Chichani. Sunya Rashi may be good and Debbie says Sunya Rashi Medang, Sunya Le, Ani Sunya Zimbi Misheki, Debbie number Shaba Sheshindo. Kawa Sushi, Sudan Sola saw Judang. Debu Les. 아니 제불에 다 라시지 타대바 메바 내와남 타대바 메바 세 가제 개발자에 이제 라시지 타대바 메바 내와남 여바 잠시 미베 여바 잠시도 미베 아니 라시의 제왕 내와 쳐도 라시의 제왕 라시세를 다 가자 라시 맞아체 최랑하는 게 라시 대지리 여반매장 라시지 저와매 라시지 저와 퇴지 여반매장 라시지 저와네 매도 야
여바참 직도 믹베 랑치바
수녀 도스도 주제래 수녀 라시 매비 교단 제베 넘버 샤바 셰신도 수녀 라시지 매장 아니 수녀래 되네 수녀 진비체 자신이 제우 소년집에 미세집에 넘버 잡아 신도 캐와 아니 다 수시 수당 초월라서 교당 제불에 아니 된다바 타대매 봐 내와남 와 하고서 여바잠도 미배 여바잠도 미배 여바잠시도 미배 랑신의 제왕가와치 랑신의 제왕가와치 대치 여바미장 랑신의 제왕매도 시순받다로 연나양 랑신 조금 말해.
So this is explained then also in the commentary on the Chandrakirti's own commentary on the introduction to the Middle Way, where it says that who is intelligent or who is educated, while knowing that knowing the way in which a reflected image can be posited or presented as in a cause and result relationship or cause and effect relationship, which is without intrinsic existence. So here it's saying that just the reflected image as cause is able to give rise to an effect, which is the awareness of the reflected image, the visual awareness of the reflected image. And so the reflected image and the visual awareness functioning as cause and effect, if somebody understands that those don't have intrinsic existence, that that's the cause and the effect there are without intrinsic existence, then who is intelligent would think that 개바 수식 속동
개바 수식 도와도 개바 수식 어디다 데려와.
So who is intelligent, having
소당 초알라서 규당 개불래 아니 된다바 타다메바 내와놈 여바잠시도 미배 랑신 된다바 매장 여바잠시도 미배 아니 랑신의 제왕 내와치 처랑하는 그 랑신의 제왕 내와치 대실이 여바잠도 매장 랑신이 좋아요 말해.
So who is intelligent in observing that that things like physical forms and sensations, etc., as causes, and then as cause and effect and so forth, which are not intrinsically different, separate or different from one another. They don't exist such that they are different by means of their own intrinsic nature. They're not ultimately different. They don't exist in that way. That is like a physical form and a sensation as cause and effect. These sorts of things that operate in causal relationships with one another. So by someone who, having observed that those things exist, these things, the simple existence of those things, then who's intelligent would consider them to possess intrinsic existence. Therefore, observing something as existent does not so seeing something as existing does not entail that it arises by means of its own intrinsic nature.
Oh yeah, 예수 맞다로 호체. 다탄다 대다 마체나 세 여바당 라신지 여바당 예비 체바당 매 라신지 매바당 때는 매바기 아니 체바대 마체나 아니 양나 따따라 송예 양나 타따라 송예 어시고 세지다 자와니 디다 마체나 혼자 셔바 타니고다 마체나 아이我也亲切然后我也不得那다 브란지 뭐 마체디 여바 칸이然后我也不得不努啦真的레세님 보러 송하나지 란자나 와라这出吧说呢 아니 랑게 세전에 봐 저니고 말이 전에 레세님 보러서 여여나 아니 랑게 천이 요아래 랑게 천이지만 아니 랑자는 나와라出송하래出吧说呢 아니 사마디 자제님 봐 저투고 말이 전에 다 내신이 몰려와 어디서 되는 대단 맞잖아 뭐예 친제 랑거 뭐 여바탕 랑거 뭐의 매 친제 다 랑거 뭐의 맨지라 맞는데 가이다 아니 때는 여바 좀 못도 봐 랑거 세신에 봐 좀 미니에서 다시 시원하 시전이 랑거 뭐의 매 친제 예매도 손에 손에 나 정도다 군주민이지 타니라 마다데 간데레에서 예 친제 랑거 뭐 여기나 랑거 뭐였다나 아니 정도 랑거 뭐 여바데 정도 타체 대전나 정도 그 탈롱 랑거 뭐 매나 매친 매나 때나 매봤더니 예매도 소나 때나 매봤데 군대 그 타체 때나 매봤으나 군대 그 탈롱아 인자도 도다 와라 정비도 맞지 타니라 마다데
So then it continues saying, so that's just as it's explained in the self-commentary of the Introduction to the Middle Way. And then here there's a further explanation showing that the way in which, if one does not differentiate those two, mere existence and intrinsic existence, or non-existence and not existing by means of intrinsic identity, if you're not able to distinguish those, then one will fall into an extreme, one of the two extremes of either holding things to exist in a way they don't exist, the extreme of superimposition or exaggeration of the status of the thing, or one will fall into the extreme of underestimation or deprecation of things, not accepting them as existing to the degree that they actually do exist. And then there's evidence given of the textual citations that are evidence for this as well. So then the text begins that if one does not distinguish these two, then as soon as something exists, something exists, then it must exist by means of its own intrinsic character. So here, if you say here, you could say intrinsic character or intrinsic identity. Intrinsic identity meaning that when you examine the object of the base for which upon which the object is designated, and you look for that object, if all the other schools of philosophy other than Prasangika hold that one has to find the intrinsic identity of the thing has to be findable in some relationship to the base, it has to be established objectively within the basis of designation in some manner. Otherwise, if it doesn't have that kind of intrinsic identity, then there's no way to establish it at all as being an object which can be evaluated and ascertained through valid cognition. So in their position, absence of intrinsic identity would entail the inability to establish things in the relationship of an object of valid cognition and the valid cognition which is knowing that sort of object. So for all these other schools of philosophy, as soon as if something exists, then it necessarily has to exist by its own character. And if you then on the other hand, if something does not exist by means of its own character, such that you could say, and here you could also say, if it doesn't have its own intrinsic identity, then it has to become completely or absolutely non-existent, completely annihilated. And if you adhere to either of those kinds of positions, one is not going to go beyond the two extremes of superimposition and undervaluation or underestimation, deprecation of things. One will not be able to go beyond those two.
Oh yeah. 군도 지산이라 마다디 야외 들어와래 시제에 들어와래 뭐보 여바마 왔다나니 치다난 거 뭐보 되다 뭐 여바마 와서나 지당 다 덴버 주용 뭐마 와라 뭐보마 여바마 와 심점 매제라 고고하래 다 탄주비노 시샤샤가나 란주바야 뭐마 와라 튼주 주고 와래 Temba Tuwa, Duguwa Marite, Ranshinji Chua, Dudigana, and Temba Chua, Tunji Kailamba in Zang. Tunji, Mobomaba Tugori. In Zang, Mobomawa, Moboyaba Mawa Tanani, Shisidu. Mowati Chidanang, Mowati, Yabani Yimba Tesetu, Mowo Yimba, Yabani Yimba Tesetu, Tatajin, Shuanashin, Tetarang, Mo Yabani Yimbe, Yabakang Rang, Mo Yaba Debi Lula, the Shanyan Busuate. Chisudu, Mowati, Yaba Yimba Tesetu, Tetarang, Moya Yabani Yila, Ramana Tribun, Yaba Yila. Congress. Rangu Modan Chawa Tisena. Ane Chidanangu Movotema Congress, Ane Rangu Mom, Ane Ranguna Tribune Modan Chawa Tisena, Chidanangu Motelan, Te number Tamjedu, maybe Pombiradan driver. Oh, Nisumawala, my David. Is Mawala, my David Ranzaji Tuatana, Yana, Tatala Luada, Yana Metala Luani, Tatala Yamari, Yana, then the Roa is Mawala, my David, Tisri, Mumba Dobatam, Trikawa Juro.
So then this is also the way that one does not, one cannot pass beyond these two extremes of superimposition or deprecation of things, undervaluation of things. This is also explained in the commentary, Master Chandrakirti's commentary on the 400 verses of Aryadeva. And then this says that in the view of those who advocate the existence of real things with respect to things, or one could say that things are real, that are and here, or we'll just for short call them realists. Realists are people, are advocates of the view that things exist on some level as real. So these realists here, it's primarily targeted at the mind-only school and downward, the other Buddhist schools and other non-Buddhists that advocate realism of this sort. But one could also say, so in general, one wouldn't say that the Swatantrika Madhyamikas are realists in this sense, because they say that things are not ultimately existent. Yet, because the Swatantrikas say that conventionally one has to establish intrinsic identity of things, then there's implicit within their position a kind of realism, even if they don't recognize it as such. So, from the Prasangika perspective, then, one could say that even the Swatantrikas have to be classified as realists and advocating some sort of real status of things. So then the realists, in their position, they would say that to the extent that a thing exists, to that extent, it has to exist by means of its own character. Here, own character means being established from its own side or objectively. There has to be some sort of objectively established existence of the thing. So they say that if a thing exists, so as long as a thing exists, that existence has to be established objectively or by means of the intrinsic character of the thing. When a thing is separate from its own character, when it doesn't have that kind of intrinsic character, then that thing is completely non-existent. Just like the horn of a donkey. It's similar to the horn of a donkey as being a completely non-existent thing. So, and that being so, if one has this position, because one does not transcend this kind of dualistic speech, here advocating two alternatives: either things have to exist by means of their own intrinsic identity, or they're non-existent, or if things are exist, they must exist by means of their own intrinsic identity. Those sorts of positions. Here, since one goes beyond, since they're not able to go beyond these two alternatives of exaggerating the status of the thing or underestimating the status of the thing, then it's very difficult to accommodate their suppositions.
Oh yeah,这搞丢些说，大孙把他听你看个谁做看的是那大约大当，俺没得牛的，他听你看的是个的是军战天呐，我觉得军战天呐是很多的，让给我也没白，俺你越大是吧？让给我没白，让新记住没白。让新记住我让新记住我没白越大，让新记住吧越比让新记住吧的他的谁，他当插话去，让新记住吧当把听你没把听了，听你了，俺你看说让新记没被军人叫女呗，俺你没得了说话，可是俺做一个。叫我给我当我们用些别当你全部那么错，我们让些的没白，俺你看说的让些的注意越得他当差，让些的没把些别落地给越别他塞，是吧？我不军队了说话，让些的没讲军队了说的，我军队了说的，我不叫你呗，没被他当差。做女把写完，俺们没得写，落开的写了，哦呀，
杨教授嘛，杨教授嘛，
对的。但那让给我越大他们家当这个呢，让给我嘛，让星期只有我没把印章，让星期出吧当查吧去，是吧？也比他们家当查吧，他的查，他们家的查吧，他们家干。让些没把多别落地，越他3个的钱，是吧？也比他3个的这个落地。那这里，让些没把听你了，让些没比，让些你没讲，军队是叫女把印章，没比他们家的差，没得当差。军队叫些比落地，没得3个落地钱。
So then, therefore, by understanding that things are devoid of existing by means of their own intrinsic character, by means of their intrinsic nature, that eliminates all of the extremes of existence. So here, through understanding that things are devoid of existing by means of their own intrinsic character or nature, that eliminates the entirety of the extreme of existence. And understanding that, having that kind of understanding, and then also understanding that within the context of that absence of intrinsic existence, one is able to establish or posit, validly posit and establish a causality which is without intrinsic existence. Then one is able to become free from all of the extremes of non-existence.
Oh yeah, so never met a tamjela trolo che. 大约没几他们当，大约可是他也没去把，大约可是个他的他，看是让兴趣出来的说过是吧？没去把肯定的是啦，他看上学那些钱，你一年给那么些这边那个啦，他 타이 주자데 타세의 민주자들라 아니 망보요아레스 탄에 세단 주자다 내다 초다 매발라오 세바당 주비차당 냐와당 초당 양 매발라서 망보지 여반남지 나네 시승바다지 탄마라루라야 칼레메 스타티 지단테다 타세 세베차당 주비차당 dinzo라루라 칼레메장 다다 타자 우미 남세게 타자기 아니 타데 가르레서나 아니 가소레 따위 고사케 타데 라따위 고사케 타데레 타자 우미 남세 우미 남세 아니 타타데 따위 고사케 타데 가르레서나 우만 나와 가서 까마르시레 우만 나와 가서 가데 오마발라 심지랑게 다니지 오 심지랑게 오에 다니지 오 태안담바 짱 롱아시 여바 주나니 대제 대라 태여바 도바 다곰 미다고시 시에샤와라 오바 셴바 치타 타추데 다두스와레 우만나에 가서 우만나와의 취된 샤지 미시와 가만히 실라 취된 샤지 미시와라 아니 셈 랑게 다니도 추바 취된 샤지 미시바 인자 셈데 랑게 오에 다니지 오레스 대 전담바 추바 마르에서 전담바 지양으로 마시 여바 주나 따뜻 타다레스 거래 여바 주나니 대제 대라 대여바데 아니 딱바 미다고 셰샤와 몸바셔바 치다타 주데 뭐비 태권하니 치다와 신도 제수 송신出现 일라 쳐바니네 동인내서 타 주다 가르에서나 아니 뭐비 태권하니 치다와 신도 제수 송신 제래 뭐비 태권하니 치다와 신도 제수出现 일라 쳐바니 동인내서 셰샤와니 르바 마이노 시간라 뭐비 태권하니 치다와 신도 제수 出现 일라 쳐바데 동인내 말레스 내서 셰샤와들 르바 말레스 와 시다 내비 되라 시다 내비 되라 일라 쳐바니 동인내 미베 타지메바 송바다 임베 다 라신지 주바지나 아니 다 타레스 지대나 양내 안에 대바주다
Was die Loben kann
오만 나와래
was die
아데스
simge ranking ngoni
오만라 오마발라 셈지랑게 다니지 오디 세가 아니
된담바
셔와 셈 안에랑게 다니도 주바 와 셔와 시den도 메데바 인상 와 랑게 다니지 오디 된담바 지양 주바 셔바 주나스나다 셈 된담바 여바 주나 랑게 유단 다니 지바기 아니 셰와데 아니 된다바 여바 주나 대제텔라 여바 따고 미다고 시에 온바셴바 치다 타 주데 안 대발
die simge ranking nur tani gegenüber die tani to killing ra tani to killing ra
대 타녀도 여바
요래
시에 다니 섬으로 와 다대 된다바 주나 시에 다니
된다바 killing manner
된다바 켈링 말아 된다바 주나
So this then, when the simple, merely the mere extreme of existing and non-existing, a simple existence and non-existence, that in a extreme in that sense, and the point at which one can go astray in the view. The two forms of extremes, which are specified as the points upon which one can go astray in the view, are not identical. They don't have the same connotation here. And then this is explained below, that with regard to extreme, the word extreme, there's the text of Master Vasubandhu, which is the explanation of ways in which one explains the Buddha Dharma. The title is Namshe Rigpa in Tibetan. And that text says, extreme has the sense of multiple connotations, this word extreme. It can mean extinction, it can mean the final part of something, it can mean proximity, it can mean direction or portion, or it can mean lowliness. So there are all these multiple meanings of different kinds of extreme, senses of the word extreme, which are acceptable even within our own system. So the Prasangika, you can't say the Prasangika does not accept extremes at all, because the word extreme is employed and is utilized. However, when it comes to the extreme, which is the point at which one can deviate on the path, that is, deviate from the path. Here, the path is called, this specifically, this view here is called the view which is separate from extremes, and this view which is separate from extremes is the Madhyamaka path. So the extreme that is specified in that sense, which is the point of deviation, this gets explained in Kamala Shila's, the Master Kamala Shila's lamp for the middle way. And then it says that if in the middle way mind had any sort of ultimate condition that consisted of its own intrinsic character, then since it would have that, how would strong adherence to eternal or non-eternal be extreme? Okay, so to unpack this a little bit, in this system of Madhyamika, because it's the Yogacara Madhyamika, they accept that external objects are non-existent, or they hold the position that there are no objects which are substantially different from external to and substantially different from the cognitions that are cognizing these objects. So then that's one thing. Then they accept also that there's a condition which consists of the intrinsic character of mind. That is, that mind has a kind of character, or I'm sorry, a sort of condition which has its own intrinsic character, but they assert that that is conventionally existent, not ultimately existent. So that's another difference, point that has to be kept clear. So Kamala Shila is saying here, if in the middle way, mind had any sort of ultimate condition that consisted of its own intrinsic character, then since it would have that, how would strong adherence to something being eternal or one could translate this as permanent or impermanent, how would that entail being an extreme?
당연히 오유 텐단 바에 마스를 배나 수다고 sem용오르와 sem지를 sem기단 단위 지병오 오 텐다버 여바 주나 대지 여바 따고 미다고 शे자와 온바시바 치다 타 주대 아 대지 대라 대여배에서 텐단바 여배 따고 미다고 शे자와 온바시바 치다 타 주대 우리 교관이 지다와 신도 제송신에서 최남이 친나가는 그 오코란 게 예수 대관이 지다와 신도 제송신 아니 수시 일라 제반이니 아니 동이 내서 세자원의 동이 내로 내서 자원의 리바 말에 시 아니 최남지 내주 지다른 내외 된 대다도 일라 제반이 동이 내 민배 대다도 전바데 탄생게 나와야 말이 탄생면 봐야 송바 딸을 임배 다오나 타 간데사고래서나 얘게 세바세데 탄이 세단 주다당 세가라 지대나 차양라타 차조 양 사부지나 와라 양 차양라타당 테를 흥화라 탈라 흥화 마와 신도 최남 덴바 쯤바 최남 덴바 쯤바 세가 최남 랑시지 주와데 덴바 주와데 탈라지 샤네 아 덴바 쯤바당 타데 쯤바당 지양 매바데 매베 탈라 샤네 매바 주와 쯤바데 마주바 어디 지양 마주바 여바다 매바 쯤바니 최남 덴바 여바 쯤바당 때는 매바 쯤바니 양답이 텐지 도저지 다제가 탈흥화래 양답이 텐지 도저기 라신지 여바 셈바데 다달흥화다 때는 매바 셈바데 매달흥화 야
이 다바당 미다바디 다베타단 제베타 요로와 다 그래서 디 다고
다체지 탈흥화이 다체 다체다
다고시 미다고 Okay, so there, where it says instead of saying permanent or impermanent, it should be read as eternal or not eternal in the sense of annihilationist. And then, so the passage actually continues. And mitak said the.
단단히 저는 봐줘 요한이 여봐 주나니 대제 대라 뭐요 다니 대라 대예배 야나 아니 담바 주비 당바 야나 담바 주비 미다고写자와 엄바셔봐 치다 다 주대 다대 주와티체 라 다대라 주와대라 뭐위 태권한 치다와 치도 제수 송신 수신 일라 제바네 두인에서写자와를 봐 말해 라 대담 대마인 비준장 가르 치단 내위 되라 대다도 일라 제바 인장 두인내 마인배 배점바데 탄증 말이 와 다오는 탄증 가르에서나 직대나 자양라 타당 태라 흥화라 타라龍華 寫마와 신도 최나 덴바 점바당 지양마 주바당 여바당 매바 점바니 세랑신지 여바데 때나 매바 점바니 양답이 텐지 도저지 다제가 탈롱하래
So then I'm in the translation, it should be translated as permanent or impermanent, holding those as being either intrinsically permanent or intrinsically impermanent. That strong adherence to that would be how would holding things as existing in that way, if the way they actually exist, be the extreme, which is a strong adherence to things being permanent or impermanent. And then it says, so it continues after that, saying that if when one is following the reality of things as it is, and one is fixing one's attention on a thing, on the reality of a thing as it actually is, then how would it be appropriate to call that a state of having fallen, meaning into an extreme? And then, so then the explanation, this is the end of the quotation from the lamp for the Madhyamika in Kamala Shila's text. And then the commentary on this says that attention to the way in which things exist, that is the way in which they exist as they exist. Attention to the way in which things actually exist as it is, in that way as it's been described up above, is not a state of having fallen into one of the extremes. Therefore, it's not a adherence to an extreme. And so that being the case, just as in the world, when we say that when someone has fallen into an abyss, fallen off the edge of a cliff, then that person has fallen off an extreme, or off an edge. Just like that sort of worldly use of the term to fall off an edge or fall into an extreme. Then holding phenomena as being real, or adhering to phenomena as not being established in any way whatsoever. So holding things either as existing in the way that they're grasped at as being real or adhered to as being real, or holding things as being non-existent in the sense of not existing in any way whatsoever, not being established in any way whatsoever, this apprehension of existence or non-existence in that way is the state of having fallen into the extremes of eternalism and nihilism, which are the opposites of the actual condition of things, but holding. Stop there for the moment. Member Zambani. Member Zambani. Chiang Madrupatang, Yupa member Zambani.
Chiang Madrupatang, Yupa member Zambani, Chiang Mebata. Chedam Demba Zimbada, Chenam Meba Chiang Madrupatang, Yupa member Zambani. Anikare, Yanda between the daughter, the Tajak Talumare, Yanda between the Yanda Tony Lashana. Tea and daughter, the Tajak Taluma Yinji is Chedam Demba Zina Ani Datalum, Chiam Madruba Zina, Chetalum. Yoba said, Rashi Yoba Zina, Yan Datalum. Yoba member Zinani, Chetalum. Chetaluma Yinzam. Yanda between the Drondoji Taji Tatoma Yinji, Chernum turned up a Mebatang, Lander so a Yoba Zimbani, Tenzin Mindi, Lander, Ledan Jebu, Tapa Nama Dado Ledan Jebu Te. Chernum turned up a Meba, now one actually Chertam but turned up but Tapa in the Suma to you the 10 Navichel.
So then, those are the ways of falling into an extreme, or the condition of having fallen into an extreme. That is, holding things as either eternally existent or as existing in the way that they're misapprehended by the superimposition of intrinsic existence, or superimposition of a degree of real status that they don't actually possess. That kind of misconception, or the misconception that is holding things as being completely annihilated, that they don't exist in any way whatsoever. That one can't establish any kind of definitive causal relationships or any kind of anything definitively. That sort of extreme, which is the extreme of nihilism, or one could say the extreme of non-existence, or the extreme of the underestimation or deprecation of the existence of things. Those sorts, all of those those two possibilities, excessively positing the existence of things or underestimating the existence of things, are the opposites of the of emptiness. Emptiness, which is the real or actual object here, the thing which actually exists, and then, however. Holding things, phenomena, as being devoid of intrinsic existence, not ultimately existing, and holding things as phenomena such that conventionally they exist as karma and its results and so forth. That is, that one can establish validly the relationships between cause and effect, between karma and its results. This is demonstrable within the context of things not possessing intrinsic existence. That although they're devoid of some kind of ultimate existence, they do exist conventionally, and that conventional existence can be established through valid demonstration. So those sorts of holding things as not existing ultimately, or holding them as existing conventionally, is not a form of adherence to an extreme.
Oh yeah. That is Shejela. And you can't do it, Rashi Meba Maina, and the Rashi Yoba Yungore. Rashi Yoba Maina, Rashi Meba Yungores. Rashi Yoba Yang Mai, Meba Yang Main Bagi, and the Punsum Shaya Maris. Oh, Mimi Gitava Kailando, or Tenitinza. Rashi Meba Nilona, Rashi Nidu Rabdu, or Rashi Meba La Lona, Rashi Meba Maina, da Rashi Yoba Yoko, Rashi Nidu Rabdu. She turned them by Meba Maina, and it turned them to Yokores. Turned them by Meba Maina, and it turned them to Yobasumba.
So, thus, the reason those holding things as not ultimately existing and holding things as conventionally existent are not extremes is because those things exist in the way, as objects, those things exist as they're apprehended. That is, emptiness, the absence of ultimate existence is apprehended as it is, and then likewise, as far as conventional things, they exist as conventional things. So the way they're apprehended as conventional things, they do exist in that way. So then, as evidence for that from the texts, then the rejection of arguments is quoted, and it's and here by Arya Nagarjuna it says, if one if things were not devoid of intrinsic nature, then they would be definitively established as being intrinsically existent. So Rangshan Mepa Nilona, Rangshan
Mepa Nilona, Rashin you to Rabdutum. Rashin Meba La Lopati, Rashin Meba Maina, and the Rashin the Java Yunkure.
So if something was not, if something was the opposite of not existing intrinsically, then it would necessarily exist intrinsically. These are opposites.
Oh, she turned up a Meba Maina, and it turned up a Teyogore, Teyoba Sumbatans. Turned up a Meba Maina, and it turned Yogores, Yoba Kansila, turned up a Meba Maina, and it turned up a Yoba Maina, turned up a Yoba Maina, and it turned Yogores. Nida Tanya Kenyan Malamba, Neja Chabra Micheto.
So then that statement shows that if things were not absent of ultimate existence, if they were not devoid of devoid of existing ultimately, then they would have to be ultimately existent. And then the opposite of that is true. If things were ultimately existent, then they could not be not ultimately existent. These two are contraries. And then it says that, likewise, and there's another quotation from the same text, which says that without taking up conventions, we do not explain things.
That's right.
Tanyiki.
Turned up a Meba Maina, 된다봐 요거래 좋아 된다봐 매봐봐 있는 된다봐 요거래 된다봐 얘나 안에 타냐도 매봐요 요거래 인상 타냐 캐는 말람바 내가 쳐버려 매자고 좋아 타냐도 여봐 캐 말람바데 아니 지난날 공고 가져가 내가 쳐버려 미쳐도 인상 타냐도 여봐 인상 된다봐 매봐
So we could say here also that if things existed ultimately, they could not exist conventionally. Conventionally existing and ultimately existing are opposites, so they're mutually exclusive. Therefore, if things ultimately existed, they would not conventionally exist. And so then the text says here, without taking up the conventional, we don't make any explanations here. We don't explain things. So this is 타니케니
말람바 내가 쳐봐 미치도 치다나 그 쳐는 타냐도 여봐 캐 매는 바당 내가 쳐봐 미치
된다봐 매봐.
된다봐 매봐 인자 타냐도 여봐래.
So because things do not exist ultimately, they exist conventionally, and without taking up these conventions, without using conventions, we don't provide any, we can't provide any explanation of things.
Oh yeah. 돈이 된저비 가서 대된 디중 세차와니 주 아니 오 가르사 개와당 미케빌레 딜라 때네 개부 중화당 아니 대화 중화 세차위 아니 가서 디된 디중 세차위 지된 수도 고메제 어 지된비 아니 지된 바라 아니 가서 차신 수박이 수대 아니 고바메제 인장 라신지 매장 아니다 디된 디중 세비 지된 수도 고바메제 라신지 좀나 아니 줄에는 더 중화당 대 아니 믿어봐.
So then there's a quotation from the 70 verses on emptiness, which says that where we don't negate this way in which the world says that this arises in dependence upon this. It's commonly established in the world that things arise in dependence upon other things. And this is not to be negated within this system. So 디든 디중 shecho 직든 수디.
디든 디중 제자위 직든 수디 고면세. 디든 디중시 유 대화다 메게빌렌 딜라테네 제우게 대두 디중 세차위 아니 지된 발라 차신 주비 수대 아니 고버면세.
We don't negate this commonly accepted and established way the world understands things. That for example, from virtuous actions, happiness arises. From non-virtuous actions, suffering arises. These relationship, this causal relationship, that things depend upon arise in dependence upon other things. We do not negate this.
Oh yeah. That's 주바 예미미미소에 탈 동미 와서 제바 측담나 차와니 여바 민바당 여바 니당 매바당 매바 민바 와 채바니 여바 민바당 여바 니당 매바 민바당 아니 매배 채바 여바 민장 아니 가서 여바 마인장 여바 민바 마이스 매바 민바 매장 여바 마이스 매바 민바 매장 여바 마이스 여바 민바 매장 아니 매바 마이스 예미미미게 따와 캐는 바다 특점지디 제바 요 말이스 여바 민바당 아니 여바 민바다 매바당 매바 민바다 여바 니라 대당 대니니라 개바요 말했어요. 체체와니 말루잠도 세지 말루지 개바자도 차대 니기 더 로라 차주라 치듬다다 개바메 싫어. 여바 민바 차주당 매바 차라 로라 차주라 개바요 말했어요. 매바 민바 차와당 여바 차와니라 로라 차주요 개바요 말했어요. 치듬다량大将 차바지양 매비 치나 수들 타르 동미동 마와니 다 측점라 차바레 어떤 대니가 차바지
페이지 마다바요 되나 시디 여반 멤버당 여반이 선아디
여반 멤버다 여반이당 여반 멤버다 여반이당 매반 멤버다 여반이 여반 마이나 아니 여반 멤버인 거고 말이지
지시 근데 여반 멤버당 매반이
매반 멤버다 매반이 있으니까 매반 마이 가서 매반 멤버 마이나 여반인 거 말이지 여반 멤버 마이나 매반인 거 말이지 되게 잡아지 그거라서
라
그래서 라루라 여반 민바당 매바 지바체 매반 민바당 여반이 지바체 라 매반 민나 여반 인고라
네
인상 다 두스 가서래 치당 난기 쳐나 아니 여반 민바 레베스나 여반 민바 레스 매바 레베스나 마레스 차바체 치당 난기 쳐나 여바 레베스나 여바 마레 가서 여바 마레 매바 민바 레베스나 레스 남나 차체나 다 말루기 차바도 차바레스
지 여반 멤버당 여반이
아루다 여반 민바당 여반 민나 여바 인고라 여바 마이나 여바 인고라 와 매바 마이나 매바 마이나 여바 미나 여바 미나 여바 마이나 매바 인고라 매바 마이나 여바 인고라
네 페이지 마다버베
마다와 말이야 그랑 같이 지고 와지 와 지난공고 매바 레바서나 매바 마레스 연나 랑시 요고레 연나 랑시 요고와 인자 여바야 마이스 랑시 지면나 메고고레서나 매바야 마이스 예미미미 나바디스 거라
유민 메밍 따라 여반 멤버당 여반이
치단난 고원남 랑시 여바 마인장 여바 마레 랑시 여바 마레스 여바 마레스
안진기 여반 마인창
여바 마인
여반 마레스
치단난 영어원은 매바레베스나 마레스 여바 마인 바인 매바 마레스
여반 마인바 라 여반 마인바 여반 마인바당 여반이
여바 마인바당 여반이당 매바 민바당 매비 쳐봐
매바 개바체니
말로기 저와 대서라 매바 민바 미나 여바 인고레베스나 대인고 마레스 아니 매제 여반이다 매바 민바다 매집이 체체제시 차바점 레마도 아니 고유 가르사나 랑시지 연나 여고 랑시지 좀나 아니 가서 랑시지면에 때네 매고래 아니 치다난 거 매바레바스나 매바마인 바이 여바마인 바인 랑시지 연나 여고 와
안신연의 유고래
랑시지 연나 랑루라 랑시지나 여고와 인자 랑시지나 여고와 인자 랑시지 매장 랑루라 랑시지 매장 아니 때네 매바 말이 시거와 다 코란 그 랑시지면에 때네 매바 도고와 인장 아니 매바 많이
매바 많이 쓰는 아니 Okay, then the translation has to be amended here. It says there, therefore, when someone makes a distinction between the two with respect to a thing, So if somebody is making differentiating things, taking a thing and saying that there's a difference between something being not existent and existent on the one hand, and something being not non-existent and non-existent on the other hand. This comes down to a mere manner of this gets reduced to a mere difference in a way of speaking about things, because when one examines this, the way in which these appear, both of these appear to one's mind, the meaning of both of these, the way they appear to one's mind, then as much as one examines them, there's not even the slightest difference at all. So this, someone who says that in this way one's able to avoid, one either falls or does not fall into extremes, saying that using this sort of way of using language is a simple fondness for the mere words that are being employed.
Oh yeah.
Again. Wrong yupamayin yupani. Wrong
yupamayina meba yingorwa.
Meba yingore.
Yupamayina yoba yingore. Meba mayina ani yoba yingorwa.
So in the translation, Jeffrey seems to have followed a different text or changed the text, I think, to read the negation and the second pairs of the negation of the second members of each of the pairs as if they were the opposite of the way it appears in this text. But Rinpoche is saying that the way it appears in our text is correct, that this is describing a kind of position which is holding that you can say that one doesn't say that things, or it's a view that holds that thing
아니 요거요와 인장 같이 되게 치단한 그 천나 라시지 여장 가서 라시지 매장 연나 라시지 요거 인장 아니 라시지 매장 아니 매발에 여바 말이 여바 말이 봐 여미 연나 라시지 요거 저 라시지 매장 여바 말이 다 매발에서나 매발에서나 여바 마이나 아나 가서 매발에서나 야 매바 말했을 거래. 봐.
매바 말했어. So this position holds that if things existed by means of their intrinsic nature, then they would be existent. Therefore they say that would be an extreme, and therefore they say that they're not existent. And then if you say that they're completely non-existent, that would be an extreme, and therefore they say that they're not non-existent. And so they make these kinds of differentiation between things being they differentiate something being existent and distinguish that from it not being existent, and then they also distinguish between something being non-existent and it being not being non-existent.
말루지 개발장도 제대 아니 개발미 가르래서나 아니 매바당 매바 마인바당 여발로라 차주당 여바 마인바당 매발로라 차주니라 개발요 말이었어 말루 개발장도 제대 마도 니게 로라 차주라 치점대게 개발미비 치나 수대 탈도 무도 마와니 특탐나 차와서도.
But in reality, no matter how much one thinks about something being not being existent, and it being and trying to differentiate that from it,
여바 멤버당 여바 멤버이나 여바 라 아니 메바 멤버미나 메바
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 멤버이나 메바 멤버마이나 여바라 라 여바 마이바이나 메바라.
So then, no matter how much one tries to distinguish between something not being existent and it being non-existent on the one hand, or something being existent and it not being non-existent on the other hand, these distinctions, there's really, as far as the way they actually appear to the mind, the way one cognizes these ways of understanding the existence or non-existence of things, there's no way, you cannot make that kind of differentiation.
Oh yeah, that details it. 차주를 지점자자 지안매비지 추들이 탈동 미루마와니 아니 틀라 차와서도 싫어. 나들이 단위와 대당 어야 답하지 자산에 니와 대당 르방 아마 유마체지 된라 두줄 좀다 되는마 디엔제기 아니 뒤제 된라 봐야기 단라 배바다 청천에 다 되는마 다 뒤마치 된라 봐야 봐서라
So this next comes. We've already discussed the way in which one establishes that created things are unreal, and then the following section discusses how uncreated things are likewise unreal, and various reasonings that are given for doing that. But we'll stop here for the moment.
Oh, yeah.